I heard the crunch before I saw it. A sound so final, so familiar that my brain didn't even bother processing it as anything else. The seventh one. The seventh mailbox she had obliterated. I dropped my coffee right there on my porch, the ceramic shattering as rage built inside me. Karen stood by her SUV, pretending to inspect her bumper as if she didn't just turn my property into her personal demolition derby. She had the audacity to glance at me, smirk and mutter, "Oh honey, these things are so flimsy. You really should invest in something sturdier." I clenched my jaw so hard I thought my teeth would snap. Sturdier? Oh, she had no idea what was coming. It all started 3 months ago, the first time my mailbox mysteriously ended up in pieces at the end of my driveway. At first, I thought it was some rowdy teenagers, maybe a drunk driver. But then it happened again. And again. And again. The pattern became clear. It wasn't an accident. It was her. Karen. The self-appointed queen of the neighborhood, who had a vendetta against me for reasons that made no sense. She never openly admitted it, of course. She played the role of the innocent suburban mom to perfection. Always with some ridiculous excuse. Maybe a storm blew it over? Maybe a delivery guy hit it? Maybe it was just poor craftsmanship? I let it slide the first few times, thinking she'd get bored and move on to terrorizing someone else. But Karen was relentless. She was a force of suburban chaos with an SUV-sized sense of entitlement. Mailbox number 4 had barely lasted 2 weeks before she crushed it like a tin can. I confronted her that time, standing in my driveway as she casually stepped out of her car, inspecting the damage like she had just bumped into a shopping cart and not, obliterated my personal property for the 4th time. "Oh, is this yours?" she had asked, blinking in faux surprise. I thought maybe the city left it here by mistake. That was the day I realized Karen didn't just destroy my mailbox out of spite, she did it for fun. By the time I hit mailbox number 6, I tried reinforcing it with cement. He hit it anyway. I tried moving it slightly inward, but she still found a way to accidentally clip it. Each time she gave me that same smug look, that same laugh like she was daring me to do something about it. And then mailbox number 7. The one that broke me. This time it wasn't just another petty inconvenience. This time a crucial job interview letter was inside. An opportunity one had been waiting for, something that could change my life. And thanks to her, it was now somewhere in the dirt, ripped apart with the rest of my splintered mailbox. He had the nerve to chuckle. "You should really go digital, Mailboxes are so 1990s. Something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to argue. That's what she wanted. Drama, attention, the satisfaction of watching me lose my mind. But this required something more. Something unbreakable. I nodded at her, a slow, knowing smile creeping onto my face. "You're right, Karen," I said, my voice too calm. "I should invest in something sturdier." For the first time her smirk faltered. I spent the next 2 weeks planning. He wanted a war, fine. I'd give her one. But on my terms. The destruction of mailbox number 7 was the last straw, but it was also the beginning of something bigger. Something she wouldn't see coming. I made some calls. A friend of mine, an engineer, laughed when I explained my idea but agreed to help. We got to work. I didn't just replace my mailbox. I reinvented it. 4 feet of steel-reinforced concrete, buried deep into the ground. Military-grade plating. Impact resistance strong enough to stop a small truck. And the best part? From the outside it looked exactly like a normal mailbox. Karen wouldn't suspect a thing. I took my time painting it, making sure it looked just like every other mailbox on the street. A little wear and tear just to sell the illusion. By the time it was finished, it was perfect. Indestructible. A monument to every petty grudge she had ever thrown my way. I installed a small hidden camera just in case. I wanted proof. Not just for the police but for my own satisfaction. I wanted to see the exact moment her smug confidence shattered, the precise second she realized she had lost. Now all I had to do was wait. And oh, did I wait. Each night I sat on my porch pretending to scroll through my phone, sipping my coffee like I didn't have a trap laid out just waiting for her to step into. She had been bold before, reckless in her destruction, but for some reason she hadn't made her move yet. Maybe she was waiting for the right moment, maybe she was distracted by tormenting some other neighbor. But I knew it was coming. And then one night I heard the engine rev. The unmistakable sound of her SUV pulling out of her driveway. The slow, calculated way she rolled down the street, headlights off, just like she always did before her little accidents. I gripped my coffee cup, barely containing my excitement. Karen thought she had won. He thought she had the upper hand. She had no idea what was about to happen. The night was still, the only sound being the distant hum of crickets and the occasional rustling of leaves. The perfect setting for what was about to unfold. I watched from my porch, my fingers tightening around my coffee cup as Karen's SUV crept down the street like a predator sizing up its prey. She thought she was being sneaky, keeping her headlights off, her foot barely tapping the gas pedal as she rolled toward my mailbox. But I knew. I had been waiting for this. She paused in front of my house. The anticipation made my pulse quicken. Even from a distance I could see her silhouette gripping the steering wheel, debating how much force she needed this time. Maybe she thought she had been too gentle last time. Maybe she wanted to make sure there was nothing left of my mailbox but dust. The engine roared. The SUV lurched forward. Then the impact. A sickening metallic crunch rang through the night, echoing down the quiet street. But this time it wasn't my mailbox that crumbled. No, this time Karen's SUV folded like a cheap lawn chair. Her front bumper snapped clean off. The hood crumpled inward, the force of the crash jamming the airbags out with explosive force. A cloud of white filled the cabin, and for a few glorious seconds, Karen disappeared into a puff of instant karma. I almost dropped my coffee. For a moment, everything was silent. The kind of silence that comes when someone realizes they've made a massive mistake. Then the car door flung open and Karen stumbled out, her perfectly styled blonde bob now disheveled, her designer cardigan dusted with the residue of an airbag deployment. She coughed, blinking furiously, trying to process what had just happened. I set my coffee down and stood up, casually strolling down my porch steps. "Oh no," I said, voice dripping with faux concern. "Did you hit something, Karen?" She spun toward me, eyes wild with fury and disbelief. "What the hell did you do?" she shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at my mailbox. My perfectly intact mailbox standing there like an unshakable monument to victory. I shrugged, stuffing my hands into my pockets. "You said I should get something sturdier." Her face turned a shade of red I had never seen before. You booby-trapped it. This is illegal. You can't just." I held up a finger, silencing her mid-rant. "Karen, let me stop you right there. You hit my mailbox. On my property. Again." I gestured toward her wrecked SUV. "But this time it looks like your luck ran out." The anger in her eyes flickered with something else. Panic. She looked at the street, at the other houses, as if suddenly realizing that anyone could have seen what just happened. Her mind was working overtime, scrambling for an excuse, an escape, anything that would turn the situation in her favor. But there was nothing. The sound of footsteps on pavement made both of us turn. My next-door neighbor, Mr. Thompson, was standing in his driveway in his bathrobe, holding a cup of tea, watching the scene unfold with the biggest grin I had ever seen. Behind him, porch lights flickered on, curtains rustled, and suddenly the whole street was awake, taking in the spectacle. Karen swallowed hard. "This isn't over," she hissed, her voice barely above a whisper. I smiled. "Oh, I think it is." She stomped back to her car, or what was left of it. The front wheels were practically useless, the axle completely ruined. She tried to start the engine, but the only response was a pitiful wheeze. I bit back a laugh. She was going nowhere. The flashing red and blue lights came before she could even call for help. Someone had already dialed the police, and within minutes an officer stepped out of his cruiser, taking in the bizarre scene before him. Karen looking frazzled and guilty. Her SUV destroyed beyond immediate repair. And my mailbox standing there like a silent judge. The officer let out a low whistle. "Well, this is different." Karen straightened up, immediately launching into her defense. "Officer. He set this up. He made his mailbox a weapon. This is illegal. He's trying to destroy my property." The officer raised an eyebrow. "You crashed into his mailbox?" Karen flinched. "No. It was an accident. It was in the way." The officer turned to me. "Sir, do you have any security footage?" I grinned. "I sure do." I pulled out my phone, already having the footage ready to go. The moment Karen's SUV deliberately turned toward my mailbox, the exact second she pressed the gas. The cop watched, unimpressed. Behind him, Mr. Thompson let out a dramatic ooh-hoo, like we were watching a reality TV show. The officer sighed and shook his head. Looks pretty intentional to me. He looked at Karen, who was now sweating bullets. Ma'am, that's reckless driving and property damage. I'm gonna need to see your license and registration. Karen sputtered, still trying to find a way out, but there was none. The entire neighborhood had witnessed it. The officer had proof. And worst of all, her precious car was now a glorified lawn ornament. As the officer took her information and started writing up the report, Karen shot me one last glare, her eyes filled with pure venom. You think this is funny? She whispered, seething. I tilted my head, pretending to think about it. Then I smiled. Yeah, I do. She stormed off, arms crossed, muttering under her breath. Meanwhile, the officer handed me back my phone, shaking his head in amusement. That's one hell of a mailbox, sir. I nodded. Sure is. Built to last. As Karen stood beside her wrecked SUV, the entire street watching, her reign of terror finally crumbling, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Victory. The morning after Karen's grand disaster was eerily quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm has passed, leaving behind nothing but wreckage and the lingering scent of destruction. Except this time the wreckage wasn't mine. It was hers. Her SUV sat there like a wounded beast in her driveway, hood crumpled, bumper missing, airbags still hanging out like a white flag of surrender. It was a monument to her downfall, and the entire neighborhood had taken notice. As I stepped outside with my morning coffee, I noticed something unusual. People were smiling at me. Not just polite passing nods, but real amused smiles. Mrs. Henderson, who barely spoke to anyone, waved. Mr. Patel from across the street gave me a thumbs up. Even the usually grumpy Mr. Dawson let out a low chuckle as he walked his dog past Karen's ruined car. The whole street had witnessed what happened last night, and the shift in energy was undeniable. For the first time in years, people weren't afraid of Karen anymore. They had seen her lose. I took a slow sip of my coffee, enjoying the feeling. Karen, however, was far from enjoying anything. Her door slammed open and she stomped outside, phone pressed to her ear, probably yelling at her insurance company. I could hear the frustration in her voice even from a distance. Something about unfair liability, and this is obviously entrapment. But the best part? The absolute cherry on top? The tow truck she had called refused to take her car until she paid for the damages up front. Karen had always been the queen of making everyone else miserable, but now she was standing in the very mess she had created, with no way out. I watched as she paced back and forth in her driveway, fuming. She must have felt my eyes on her, because suddenly she turned and glared at me. A glare so sharp I was surprised it didn't cut through the air between us. But unlike every other time, unlike all the moments she had smirked and taunted me, she had nothing to back it up. She was all fury and no fire. I raised my coffee cup in a small toast and smiled. She stormed back inside, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. For the next few days, Karen tried to act like nothing had happened. She walked around with her usual superiority, nose slightly upturned, chin high. But there was a difference now. She was avoiding people. Every time she saw me, she pretended to be checking her phone. Every time a neighbor looked at her, she suddenly found something interesting on the ground. The best moment by far was when she called an emergency HOA meeting, hoping to turn things around. She sent out an email claiming I had compromised the safety of the neighborhood by installing a hazardous structure. She even threw in a ridiculous claim that my mailbox was a danger to children, even though no child in their right mind had ever gone near it. I showed up to the meeting with a printed copy of the HOA guidelines, specifically the section that said mailboxes had to be secure and withstand reasonable weather conditions. Then I played the footage. This time in front of the entire HOA board. There was no yelling. No argument. Just the sound of Karen's credibility disintegrating in real time. The board members exchanged looks, some biting back laughter, others shaking their heads. One of them, a woman who had been on Karen's side before, cleared her throat and said, "Karen, you literally crashed into it." That was it. The moment her power collapsed completely. She tried to fight it, of course. Karen always fought. But there was no saving face. There was no way out. Her complaints were dismissed, her voice lost under the weight of her own mistakes. And then just a week later, a new sign appeared in her yard. For sale. The neighborhood buzzed with the news. Karen was leaving. She had lost her grip, lost her car, lost the respect she had lorded over everyone for years. The queen had been dethroned and she had no choice but to flee. The day the moving trucks arrived, I sat on my porch watching with the biggest smile I had ever worn. I made sure to be outside sipping my coffee as she walked out for the last time. She glanced at me, but there was no more venom, no more smugness. Just exhaustion. Defeat. I leaned back in my chair, taking in the sight of her driving away. She didn't even look back. The next week the house sold. A young couple moved in, bright-eyed and friendly, waving at everyone. The neighborhood felt lighter, freer, like a dark cloud had finally lifted. And just for fun, just as a final farewell to the chaos that had ruled our street for too long, I put up a small neon sign above my mailbox. Mailbox, 8 Karen's SUV, 0. The entire neighborhood laughed. I had won. And it felt good. You enjoyed this wild ride of revenge, humor, and suburban justice? Make sure to subscribe for more epic stories that will keep you entertained. There's plenty more drama, unexpected twists, and satisfying karma coming your way. Hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, and let me know, what would you have done in my situation? Would you have gone for the steel mailbox or something even crazier? Stay tuned for the next story, you won't want to miss it.